Have you ever noticed how a single moment of anger can shatter years of trust? How one burst of rage can leave wounds that take a lifetime to heal? I stand before you today, not as someone who has mastered the art of silence and anger, but as a fellow traveler on this challenging path of self-discovery. The truth that I'm about to share with you didn't come to me in a moment of enlightenment. It came through painful experiences, through relationships damaged, and through the profound realization that our greatest power lies not in what we say, but in what we choose not to say. Let me take you back to a scene that plays out in countless homes, offices, and streets across the world every single day. A father and daughter are caught in a heated argument. The daughter, in her teenage wisdom, has just declared her father the worst parent ever. The father feels his blood pressure rising, his fist clenching, ready to unleash a torrent of words that would put his daughter in her place. But something extraordinary happens. He remains silent, not a passive, defeated silence, but an active, conscious choice to hold his peace. That silence, my friends, is not weakness. It is power in its purest form. We live in a world that glorifies the quick comeback, the sharp retort, the witty response. Social media has turned angry reactions into an art form where the most biting comment gets the most likes. We've somehow convinced ourselves that having the last word equals winning. But I'm here to tell you that this couldn't be further from the truth. Think about the ocean for a moment. On the surface, waves crash and foam, creating spectacular displays of motion and sound. But deep beneath, in the depths of the ocean, there is profound silence. And it is in these silent depths that the most powerful currents flow. Currents that shape entire continents. Our consciousness works in much the same way. When anger rises within us, it's like those surface waves. Dramatic, noisy, attention-grabbing. But our true power, our capacity for transformation and impact lies in the depths of our being, in that space of silence that exists beneath the turbulent emotions. So every word spoken in anger is like a seed planted in fertile soil. It will grow, it will bear fruit, and we must be prepared to eat what we have sown. But silence? Silence is like the wise gardener who knows when to hold back, when to let the soil rest, when to allow nature to find its own balance. The art of staying silent when angry isn't about suppression. It's not about bottling up your emotions until they explode. No. What I'm talking about is something far more profound. It's about creating a space between stimulus and response, a sacred pause where wisdom can enter. You see, anger is like a storm cloud passing through the sky of your consciousness. The sky itself, your true nature, remains vast, boundless, and ultimately unaffected. The cloud will pass, as all things do. But the words we speak in anger, they leave trails that can last generations. I've worked with countless individuals who can still quote word for word the angry things their parents said to them decades ago. They carry these words like stones in their hearts. But how many of us remember the times when someone chose not to speak in anger? When they chose silence instead of vengeance, peace instead of conflict? This is where true strength lies. In that moment, when you feel justified in your anger, when you have every right to lash out, when you could win the argument, and you choose silence instead. This is not the silence of fear or submission. This is the silence of wisdom, the silence of power. This path isn't easy. In fact, it might be one of the most challenging practices you'll ever undertake. Our ego rebels against silence. It demands expression, insists on being right, craves the temporary satisfaction of letting someone have it. The ego whispers, if you stay silent, they'll think you're weak. They'll think they've won. Pew power doesn't need to announce itself. Think about gravity. It doesn't make a sound, yet it holds entire galaxies together. Your silence in the face of anger can have that same quiet power. There's a subtle shift that happens when you begin to practice this art of silence. You start to notice the space between your thoughts. You become aware of that crucial moment between feeling anger arise and choosing how to respond to it. This awareness is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. When you choose silence in the face of anger, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're actively participating in the creation of peace. Each moment of conscious silence is like dropping a pebble of peace into the ocean of collective consciousness. The ripples extend far beyond what you can see or imagine. I invite you to think about the last time anger got the better of you. Remember the words you spoke, the damage they caused, the regret that followed. Now imagine if you had chosen silence instead. Imagine if you had allowed that storm to pass through you without letting it destroy the landscape of your relationships. This is not about being passive in the face of injustice. There are times when we must speak up, when we must take action. But even then, we can speak from a place of centered silence rather than reactive anger. The words that emerge from silence carry a weight and wisdom that angry words can never match. As we continue this journey together, I want you to understand that mastering the art of silence in anger is not about reaching some perfect state where you never feel angry. It's about developing a new relationship with your anger, learning to see it as a messenger rather than an enemy, and choosing how you want to respond to its message. The power of silence in the face of anger is like a hidden superpower that we all possess but rarely use. It's the power to break cycles of violence, to heal relationships, to transform conflicts into opportunities for growth. And most importantly, it's the power to know yourself at a deeper level than ever before. Think of silence as the canvas upon which the masterpiece of your life is painted. Every time you choose silence over angry words, you're adding depth and beauty to that canvas. You're creating space for understanding, for compassion, for genuine connection. Right? You know what fascinates me? The way a tiny seed grows into a mighty oak tree. It doesn't happen with fanfare or announcement. It happens in silence, beneath the earth, in darkness. This process of transformation, this is exactly what happens when we choose silence in our moments of anger. I remember watching a master craftsman at work in his woodshop. When asked about his secret to creating such beautiful pieces, he said something profound. I spend more time looking at the wood than working on it. There's wisdom there that applies directly to our relationship with anger. Sometimes, the most powerful action we can take is to observe rather than react. But let's talk about what happens in our bodies when anger rises. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. Your breathing becomes shallow. Nature has prepared you for battle. And in ancient times, this response served us. But in today's world, our battles are rarely physical. They're emotional, psychological, spiritual. The weapons are words, and the casualties are relationships, trust, and inner peace. When you choose silence in these moments, something remarkable happens. You're not just holding back words. You're actually rewiring your brain. Each time you pause instead of react, you're creating new neural pathways. You're literally building a brain that defaults to wisdom rather than reaction. Think about the last argument you had. In the heat of that moment, did you say things you later regretted? Of course you did. We all have. Now imagine if you could go back to that moment. Would you choose differently? Would you choose silence? When we're angry, we believe we're at our most powerful. We feel the surge of energy, the righteousness of our position, the absolute certainty that we're right and they're wrong. But true power doesn't come from this kind of certainty. True power comes from the ability to hold space for uncertainty, to remain silent when everything within you is screaming to speak. Let me share something with you about the nature of anger itself. Anger is like a red flag waving in the field of your consciousness. It's saying, hey, pay attention. Something important is happening here. The problem isn't the anger. It's what we do with it. When we react immediately, we miss the message. When we choose silence, we give ourselves the chance to receive the wisdom that anger brings. I've seen marriages saved by silence. I've witnessed decades-long feuds healed by silence. I've watched people transform their lives by mastering this one simple but profound practice. And here's what they all discover. Silence isn't empty. Silence is full of answers. Every great spiritual tradition speaks of silence as a path to wisdom. Every great leader has learned the power of the pause. Every meaningful transformation begins in silence. This isn't coincidence. It's a fundamental truth about human consciousness. When you choose silence in anger, you're not just avoiding conflict. You're creating space for something new to emerge. In that space, solutions appear that neither party could have conceived in the heat of argument. Understanding dawns. That would have been impossible in the storm of angry words. But let's be practical for a moment. How do we actually do this? How do we choose silence when every fiber of our being wants to speak, to defend, to attack? It begins with understanding that the urge to speak in anger is just that, an urge. Like any urge, it will pass if we let it. Start small. The next time you feel anger rising, take one conscious breath before speaking. Just one breath. Notice what happens in that tiny space between the trigger and your response. That space is where your power lives. As you practice this, you'll begin to notice something extraordinary. The quality of your relationships will change. People will begin to trust you more deeply. They'll sense in you a presence that goes beyond words. Your silence will speak volumes about your character. Silence in anger isn't about being passive or letting people walk all over you. It's about choosing your responses from a place of wisdom rather than reaction. It's about understanding that the most powerful response to anger often isn't a response at all. It's a conscious choice to remain silent. Think of silence as a form of emotional Aikido. In Aikido, you don't meet force with force. Instead, you blend with the attack, redirecting its energy. When you meet anger with silence, you're doing the same thing. You're transforming the energy of conflict into an opportunity for growth. This practice will test you. There will be moments when staying silent feels impossible, when the words are right there on the tip of your tongue, burning to be spoken. These are the moments that define us. These are the moments when we either grow or remain stuck in old patterns. The beauty of this practice is that it's always available to you. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need to be in a particular place. All you need is the willingness to pause, to breathe, to choose silence over reaction. As you develop this practice, you'll begin to notice subtle changes in how you experience anger. Instead of being swept away by it, you'll start to observe it with curiosity. What triggered this feeling? What's the real issue beneath the anger? What am I really trying to protect or defend? This kind of self-inquiry is impossible when we're busy formulating our next angry response. It can only happen in the space that silence creates. And in that space, real transformation becomes possible. You'll also start to notice how your silence affects others. When you don't react with anger, you create space for them to move beyond their own anger. Your silence becomes an invitation to deeper understanding, to real communication. Think about the ripple effects of this practice. Every time you choose silence over angry words, you're not just affecting the immediate situation, you're affecting everyone who witnesses it. You're showing others a different way to handle conflict. You're becoming a living example of the power of conscious response over unconscious reaction. This is particularly powerful when it comes to children. They learn not from what we tell them, but from what we show them. When they see us choosing silence in moments of anger, we're teaching them one of life's most valuable lessons. That we have the power to choose our responses, no matter how strong our emotions might be. Let's talk about something that might surprise you. The most profound changes in human history often began with a moment of silence, not the silence of inaction, but the silence of deep contemplation before conscious choice. This is the kind of silence I'm inviting you to embrace when anger rises within you. You see, we've been conditioned to believe that quick responses show intelligence, that fast comebacks demonstrate wit. But what if the opposite is true? What if our greatest moments of wisdom come from those times when we choose to pause, to reflect? I've worked with people in high-pressure situations, executives making million-dollar decisions, parents handling rebellious teenagers, leaders managing crisis situations. And I've noticed something fascinating. Those who master the art of silence and anger inevitably make better decisions. They create better outcomes. They build stronger relationships. Think about water for a moment. When water is disturbed, it becomes cloudy, murky. But give it time to be still and everything settles, the water becomes clear again. Our minds work the same way. When we're angry, our thoughts are like that disturbed water, cloudy, unclear, agitated. Silence gives our minds the time they need to settle, to become clear again. This isn't just philosophy, it's practical wisdom that can transform your life. Every time you choose silence over angry words, you're making a deposit in the bank of your character. You're building trust. You're creating respect. You're developing the kind of inner strength that can't be shaken by external circumstances. Choosing silence in anger doesn't mean you become a doormat. It doesn't mean you accept abuse or tolerate injustice. Instead, it means you respond from a place of clarity rather than reaction. When you do speak, your words carry the weight of wisdom rather than the sting of anger. Imagine you're in a heated argument. Your heart is racing, your mind is spinning with all the things you could say, should say. In that moment, you have a choice. You can add fuel to the fire, or you can be the one who brings calm to. Your silence can be the eye of the storm, the still point around which everything else revolves. This is where real strength lies. Anyone can speak in anger. It takes no special skill or character. But to remain silent when every emotion is screaming for expression, that requires something deep. That requires real power. Let me share something profound about the nature of anger itself. Anger is always secondary. It's never the primary emotion. Beneath anger, you'll always find something else. Fear, hurt, disappointment, betrayal. When we react in anger, we're dealing with the surface symptom. When we choose silence, we give ourselves the chance to address the root cause. This is why silent strength is so powerful. It gives us the space to move beyond the surface disturbance to the deeper truth beneath. And it's in this deeper truth that real solutions. Consider this. Every word spoken in anger creates a ripple effect that continues long after the moment is past. But silence creates space. Space for understanding, space for healing, space for transformation. I've seen people completely transform their relationships by practicing this one principle. I've watched as they discovered that their silence had more impact than all their angry words ever did. They learned that silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's a presence, a power, a force for change. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Our ego resists silence. It wants to defend, to attack, to prove itself right. This is where the real work begins. This is where we have to ask ourselves, what's more important, being right or being wise? The practice of silence in anger is like developing a superpower. At first, it feels impossible. But with practice, with patience, with persistence, you begin to access a strength you never knew you had. You start to see situations differently. You begin to respond rather than react. Think about the people you most admire. The ones who have real influence in their families, their communities, their world. Chances are they're not the ones who speak the loudest or the most often. They're the ones who know when to speak and when to remain silent. They're the ones who have mastered this art we're talking about. This mastery doesn't come overnight. It's developed one moment at a time, one choice at a time, one silence at a time. Each time you choose silence over angry words, you're strengthening this muscle. You're building this power. As you develop this practice, you'll find that it affects every area of your life. Your relationships become deeper. Your decisions become wiser. Your presence becomes more powerful. People begin to trust you more, respect you more, seek out your counsel more. But perhaps the most profound change happens within you. You begin to trust yourself more. You develop a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle any situation with grace. You discover a peace that can't be disturbed by external circumstances. This is what real personal power looks like. Not the power to dominate or control others, but the power to control yourself. The power to choose your response in any situation. The power to transform conflict into opportunity. Every moment of anger is an invitation. An invitation to react, yes, but also an invitation to respond with wisdom. An invitation to demonstrate the power of silence. An invitation to be the change you wish to see in the. As you continue on this journey, know that every time you choose silence over angry words, you're not just changing your own life. You're contributing to the collective consciousness of humanity. You're showing others a different way. You're creating ripples of peace that extend far beyond what you can see. Let me share something powerful with you about the nature of transformation. Real change doesn't happen in the moments of grand revelation. It happens in those small, quiet moments when we choose differently than we did before. It happens when we catch ourselves about to react in anger, and instead choose silence. Your silence in moments of anger isn't just changing you, it's healing generations of patterns. Think about this. How many family conflicts, how many workplace disputes, how many broken friendships could have been prevented by the simple choice to remain silent when anger arose? I've observed something remarkable in my work with people from all walks of life. Those who master the art of silence in anger don't just solve problems, they prevent them from arising in the first place. Their very presence becomes a calming force in any situation. You see, anger has a contagious quality to it. One person's angry outburst can infect an entire room, an entire organization, an entire family system. But you know what else is contagious? Peace, calm. The quiet strength that comes from choosing silence over reaction. Let me tell you about something that happens when you consistently choose silence in moments of anger. People begin to feel safe around you. They sense that you won't react explosively, that you won't use their vulnerable moments against them. This safety creates an environment where real communication can happen. But here's the key. This isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending anger doesn't exist. It's about transforming the energy of anger into something more powerful. When you choose silence, you're not getting rid of the anger. You're alchemizing it into wisdom. Think about a pressure cooker for a moment. Without the lid, steam escapes immediately and nothing gets cooked. But with the lid on, pressure builds, and raw ingredients are transformed into something nourishing. Your silence in anger works the same way. It creates a container where raw emotions can be transformed into understanding. This practice requires courage, real courage. Because in those moments when anger rises, everything within you will scream for expression. Your ego will insist that you need to defend yourself, that you need to prove your point, that you need to win the argument. Choosing silence in these moments means standing firm in the face of this internal storm. But here's what makes it all worthwhile. The peace that follows your silence is unlike anything else. It's not the empty peace of avoidance, but the rich, full peace of conscious choice. It's the peace that comes from knowing you could have added to the conflict, but chose to be a force for harmony instead. Every time you choose silence over angry words, you're not just avoiding conflict. You're actively creating peace. You're doing something that few people have the strength and wisdom to do. You're becoming part of the solution rather than part of the problem. This practice will change how you view power. Most people think power is about having control over others, but real power is about having control over yourself. And nowhere is this more evident than in those moments when you have every reason to speak in anger, but you choose silence instead. As you develop this practice, you'll begin to notice subtle changes in how others respond to you. They'll begin to mirror your calmness. They'll begin to trust your stability. They'll begin to seek out your presence in times of conflict because they know you bring peace rather than escalation. Think about the leaders who have truly transformed the world, the ones who created lasting change. They all understood this principle that silence in the face of provocation is not weakness. It's strength in its purest form. But let's be practical. How do we maintain this practice in a world that seems to reward quick reactions and loud voices? It begins with understanding that every moment of anger is an opportunity to practice. Every irritation, every frustration, every provocation is a chance to strengthen this muscle of conscious response. Start by noticing your triggers. What situations reliably provoke an angry response in you? These are your practice grounds. These are the laboratories where you develop your power of conscious silence. This isn't about being perfect. There will be times when anger gets the better of you. There will be times when you speak words you later regret. Don't let these moments discourage you. They're not, they're showing you where you need to develop more awareness, more strength, more compassion. The beauty of this practice is that it's always available to you. Every interaction, every challenging situation, every potential conflict is an opportunity to choose silence over reaction. And each time you make this choice, you're not just changing the immediate situation, you're changing yourself at the deepest level. Think of silence as a form of meditation in action. When you meditate, you learn to observe your thoughts without getting caught up in them. When you practice silence and anger, you're doing the same thing, observing your angry impulses without being controlled by them. The power to choose your response in any situation. This is true freedom. Not freedom from anger. Anger will still arise, but freedom from being controlled by anger. Freedom to respond with wisdom rather than reaction. As you continue on this path, you'll discover something remarkable, and your silence becomes more powerful than your words ever were. People begin to listen more carefully when you do speak because they know your words come from a place of wisdom rather than reaction. The journey we're on together isn't just about personal transformation. It's about creating a ripple effect that touches everyone around us. When you master the art of silence and anger, you become a living example of what's possible. You become a force for transformation in your family, your workplace, your community. Let me tell you what I've observed in those who have mastered this practice. They develop a presence that's almost magnetic. People are drawn to their calm strength, their unshakable peace. They become natural leaders, not because they seek leadership, but because others recognize the wisdom in their way of being. You see, there's something profound that happens when you consistently choose silence over angry reaction. You begin to see conflict differently. Instead of seeing it as something to win or lose, you see it as an opportunity for understanding. Instead of seeing the person who provoked your anger as an enemy, you see them as a teacher. Think about the legacy you're creating. Every time you choose silence and anger, you're teaching others a new way. You're showing them that there's an alternative to reactive behavior. You're demonstrating that real strength doesn't need to shout to be heard. This practice will change how you experience life itself. When you're no longer at the mercy of angry reactions, you discover a freedom you never knew existed. You find yourself able to stay centered in situations that would have thrown you off balance before. But here's what makes this practice truly transformative. It changes not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. You begin to trust yourself more deeply. You develop a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle any situation with grace. Consider this, every moment of anger is like a crossroads. And Paul, one path leads to reaction, escalation, and regret. The other path, the path of silence, leads to wisdom, understanding, and peace. The choice is always yours. The power of this practice lies in its simplicity. You don't need any special tools or techniques. You don't need to change your circumstances or your environment. You just need to remember that in any moment of anger, you have the power to choose silence. As we near the end of our time together, I want to share something vital. This practice isn't about reaching some perfect state where you never feel anger. It's about developing a new relationship with anger. It's about transforming anger from your master into your teacher. Think about water again. When you drop a stone into still water, it creates ripples that extend far beyond the point of impact. Your choice to remain silent in anger works the same way. The impact of that choice extends far beyond the immediate moment, touching lives in ways you may never know. This is your invitation to become part of a different kind of revolution. Not a revolution of loud voices and angry protests, but a revolution of conscious silence. A revolution that transforms the world one quiet choice at a time. Every great journey begins with a single step. Your journey begins with your next moment of anger. In that moment, you have the power to choose differently. You have the power to choose silence. The world doesn't need more angry voices. It needs more people who have the courage to remain silent when anger arises. It needs more people who understand that true power lies not in dominating others, but in mastering ourselves. As you leave here today, carry with you this truth. Your silence in moments of anger is not weakness. It is power. It is not avoidance. It is courage. It is not surrender. It is transformation. Let your silence speak of wisdom. Let your silence create peace. Let your silence transform not just your life, but the lives of all those you touch. The choice is yours. The power is yours. The time is now. And remember this. In the great symphony of life, the most powerful notes are often the ones not played. Your conscious silence in moments of anger can be the most eloquent statement you ever make. This is your moment. This is your opportunity to step into a new way of being. This is your chance to discover the extraordinary power that lies in conscious silence. Take this wisdom with you, practice it, and live it, share it. Let it transform not just your life, but the world around you. Every time you choose silence over angry words, you're not just changing a moment, you're changing the future. You're creating a legacy of peace that will echo through generations. The power is in your hands. The choice is in your heart. The time is always now. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey with you. May your silence speak volumes. May your peace create ripples. May your wisdom transform lives. The world is waiting for your silent strength. Go forth and let your peace be your power.